All right, so it's 1 o'clock, and I'm going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank you all for joining us. I'm really excited to have everyone here with us, and thank you for participating with us. So I hope you're here to learn about nature apps. Brent and I are going to teach you a little bit about some apps that can help you to learn about nature. So my name is Julia Rogers. I'm the Stewardship Coordinator with the Hudson Highlands Land Trust. And I'm going to be teaching you a little bit about some apps to help you with your birding. And in the second part of the presentation, we have Dr. Brent Boscarino from the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference, who will teach you about Seek and iNaturalist, which are two sort of more general nature apps that you can use in your nature pursuits. So just a little bit of housekeeping. At this point, everyone is muted. Please keep yourself muted while we're talking to help eliminate some of that background noise. When we pause for questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your questions. If you have questions while we're talking, you can put that in the chat box. If you don't know how to access the chat box, it should be in the black bar on the bottom part of your screen. You can see that on the picture on the right-hand side. I also just wanted to let you know that we are recording this meeting so that we can share it with others who were unable to make it at this time. So as I alluded to in my introduction, I will be starting off talking about two birding apps, Merlin Bird ID and eBird. After I walk through the two apps, we'll pause for questions, and then I'll hand it over to Brent, and Brent's going to talk about Seek and iNaturalist. We're going to try to wrap up our presentation portion by 2 o'clock in case anyone needs to get off to another meeting. But Brent and I will stick around for 15 minutes or a half hour to answer questions after we're done presenting. So please feel free to use us as resources. So I am sure you're all here because at some point or another, you have wondered about something, whether it's in your backyard or on a hike, that you haven't been able to identify, whether that's the bird that's coming to your feeder or a plant that's growing in your garden, or you're wondering about that bug that's crawling on the sidewalk. And luckily, there are apps that can help us to identify all of these things. So as I mentioned, iNaturalist and Seek are more general nature identification apps. So they would be able to identify anything from plants to fungi to birds to animals. While Merlin Bird ID is very specific to birds, and we'll be walking through all of these. I'm sure you've also all considered the plants that are in your garden or in the gardens as you walk by. But maybe you haven't wondered about where these plants originate from or what sorts of benefits these plants are providing. And in addition to be able to identify things for us, these apps can really help us to understand a little bit more about what's going on around us and understand what that habitat is and what sort of habitat that it's providing. So the picture on the right-hand side of your screen is a picture from my garden from a couple of days ago. And I just wanted to walk through a couple of types of plants. So in the forefront of the picture, we have an invasive species. This particular invasive species is garlic mustard. An invasive species is something that's introduced by humans. It's outside of its native range, and it's reducing that local biodiversity. Generally, we would think about how quickly this plant is spreading and what it's doing to the environment. In the background of this picture, we have a non-native species. So you can see those big, large green leaves. That plant is called giant butterbur. And this is a non-native species, which means that it's occurring outside of its natural range, but it's not necessarily displacing native plants, and we're not as worried about its spread, into the forest or anything like that. And then lastly, I have a native plant in my picture. And this native plant is a trillium, and native species are those that are occurring within their natural range. And I bring these up because native plants can host 3 times more butterflies, 2 times more bees, and 9 times more rare bird species than invasive plants. And so using apps And books to understand what's going on in our gardens can help us to understand how our gardens play in to the natural habitat and how we're providing habitat for pollinators and connectivity. So it's just another thing that you can consider as you utilize these apps. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive into the bird apps. So I wanted to start by providing a little bit of background. So Merlin Bird ID is an app that comes to us from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and it's designed to help you identify a bird that you saw. And to do that, it has you answer 3 very simple questions that you saw about the bird that we'll go through in a minute. And then it pulls information from those questions, as well as from using your location and the time of year to pull results from eBird and provide you a list of birds that you're likely to have seen in your area at that time. It's also like having a bird book in your pocket. And while I absolutely love my bird book, having a bird book on my phone that I carry with me basically everywhere is an excellent quick resource for when I'm out somewhere and I saw a cool bird that I don't know what it is. I can quickly look up information about it and be able to identify it. On the other hand, eBird is another app that's brought to us by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. But rather than helping us identify the birds, this helps us to keep track of the birds that we're seeing. So you can create lists of birds. So say you went on a walk in your neighborhood today, you could list all of the birds that you saw in your neighborhood and upload those to eBird. That list of birds would then be contributing to the eBird library that feeds into Merlin Bird ID, and is also used by scientists and conservationists around the world to pull information about birds. If you visit eBird on your computer at ebird.org, you can explore bird sightings all over the world. So sometimes if I'm curious if other people are seeing a bird, a certain bird species near me, I can log on to eBird and look for bird lists nearby to see what others are seeing. So before I completely dive into the apps, just a little bit more background information. So both apps require what are called bird packs, and it's basically the bird information that's being downloaded to your phone. So for those of you who are just downloading Merlin Bird ID or who are just opening it, the first time you open it, it's going to ask you to download a bird pack. It'll suggest a bird pack based on your location. So for those of us in New York or the Northeast, it'll probably recommend the bird pack of the Northeastern United States. That's what I operate off of. You could also download the whole package for the United States and Canada. It's also really great because it has bird packs for a lot of the world. They haven't covered all of the world quite yet, but if someday when we can all travel, you were going to another country, you would be able to potentially use eBird for that as well. You do not need an account for Merlin Bird ID. You'll be able to open the app, and once you have the bird pack downloaded, you're good to go. But if you're going to be using eBird, you will need to create a free account, and that would just require your email, and you sign up for the account. And then lastly, I just wanted to note that the apps will use your location data if you allow them to. It can really help them with the bird identification, and I'll leave it up to you with whether or not you want to provide that location data. So we're going to go ahead and identify a bird. So this is a video that I took in my backyard just a couple of weeks ago. And I want to walk through the 3 simple questions that Merlin Bird ID would ask us about this bird. So the first question is going to be, what is the size of the bird? And we're looking for relative size. And when we go into the app, which we'll do in a minute, it's going to show us this size range, ranging from goose-sized or larger all the way down to sparrow-sized or smaller. And this particular bird that we're looking at is a fairly small bird. Next, we're going to want to know what main colors we're seeing on the bird, and the app will ask for 1 to 3 main colors. And so I've put in a still image from the start of this video. And if I were looking at this bird, the 3 colors I might choose are that yellow stripe on the top of the head, probably the green of the back, and then that white underbelly. And then lastly, it's going to ask us what the bird was doing. And in that case, it means sort of what the bird was doing in relation to the environment, and we'll get a list of 6 options. So your options might be, is it flying or soaring? Is it hanging out in a tree? Or is it sitting on a wire? And all of these will then feed into the app and help us get an identification. So I'm going to switch screens here and share with you my iPad. So you should now be able to see my mobile device. And if you have Merlin Bird ID downloaded, I encourage you to follow along with me. If not, that is okay as well. So I'm going to start by opening up Merlin Bird ID. And you can see this is the home screen that'll come up when you open Merlin Bird ID, and you're sort of given 3 large options. And we're going to start a bird identification. So if we go ahead and open that up, the first question is, where did you see the bird? You have the option of selecting your current location, navigating to a map and selecting your location based on the map, or it also stores the 6 most recent locations that you searched for. And so in the case of this bird, we're going to look for Beekman, New York. So if you're following along with me, you can search for that in the search bar. And if we just press search, we've got Beekman, New York. And then it's going to ask when we saw the bird, and it's automatically going to default to today. However, to get an accurate result, we're going to scroll all the way back to April 6th when I took this video, and we'll select next. And now we're diving into those 3 main questions that I told you it was going to ask us. So the first question is, what size was the bird? And so like I mentioned, it's ranging on the size scale of commonly known birds. So you've got, is it goose-sized or larger, crow-sized, robin-sized, or sparrow-sized or smaller? And in this case, the bird we were looking at is fairly small. So we're going to select sparrow-sized or smaller, and then we'll select next. And then it's going to ask us those main colors. And as you can see, it says that we can select from 1 to 3. So I'm going to select that white underbelly, the yellow crown, and then the green back. And we'll select next. And then it's going to ask the last question, which was, what was the bird doing? And as you can see, we have options, eating at a feeder, swimming or wading. But in this case, it was in trees or bushes. And we'll select next. And then it's going to use all of that information that I just provided it to pull information from eBird to come up with a list of birds that I could have possibly seen at that time of year at my location that fit those qualifications. So we can scroll down this list and see the different birds that it suggests it might be. But as you might have surmised, at the top of the list, we have the golden-crowned kinglet that looks very similar to the bird we were looking at with that yellow crown on top of its head. One of the great things about Merlin Bird ID is it includes pictures of the birds at different life stages. So you can scroll through and see, perhaps we saw a juvenile golden crown kinglet, and you can see how the bird changes across different life stages. They provide a small description so that you have an idea. Kinglets you tend to see in mixed flocks at other times of the year. They also have bird songs, so I don't have my iPad sound hooked up, but if we press to this button, it would play the kinglet call. And so in this case, as I'm sure you've guessed, our bird is indeed a golden-crowned kinglet. So I'm going to select, this is my bird, and it's going to tell me, congratulations, you identified the golden-crowned kinglet. And so we have a couple of options from this point. We could identify another bird. I could share this identification with someone else, but I'm going to go to the species details page. And this provides much of the same information that we saw in the search results, but it provides a little bit more. If we look at the bar on the bottom, you can see we have the option to go to sounds. And so there I can hear both the song and the call of the bird. And depending on what bird species you look at, they might have 4 or 5 different songs and calls recorded for you to listen to. And then they also have a breeding map so that you know what time of year you might see this bird and at what different locations. And this map is interactive, so I can pinch my screen and zoom in into the Northeast, and you can see most of the Northeast is within the bird's year-round range. A little bit of southern New England is within the non-breeding range. And for anyone who's wondering, Beekman is right near the Connecticut-New York border, probably just north of that purple line, so it's probably within its year-round range. So if we go back, the one thing that I always find confusing about this app is that I never know where to find the home button. So you just have to remember that it's in the top right corner, and I find that very counterintuitive. But if we go home, it's going to ask me if I'm sure I want to start over, and I'm going to say yes. And so now, you know, we would have the option of starting another bird identification, but you can also just explore the birds. So if I select Explore Birds, this is where this app really functions like a bird book. So I could scroll down this list, and it would show me all of the birds that I've downloaded, so all of the birds in the northeastern United States. But what's really cool is it's displaying some of that eBird information underneath each bird name. So we have this gray bar underneath the birds' names that's the 12 months of the year, and the dark gray bars are indicating how likely you are to see that bird in your location at that time of year. So you can see with the killdeer, I might see the killdeer most of the year. I'm sort of in a, you know, temporary, maybe I'd see it, but I might be more likely to see it in July or August. And you can see that for all of the different birds. And it has, right now I have it sorted by families. And so it's really a great feature, you know, if you went through the bird identification and you still weren't able to figure it out, you could scroll through and see what you're likely to see at that time of year. And then much like in the identification, if we click on one of the birds, it'll bring us to that species detail page, and we can look at pictures, learn about the bird, listen to its sounds, and look at the breeding map. So it's really a phenomenal resource to just have on your phone for when you're out and about and want to learn about birds. So lastly, I am going to show you one of the sort of cool resources about this app, that you can also have it identify a photo that you've taken of a bird. And what I recently learned is that you can upload a pretty poor picture, you know, the bird can be pretty blurry and it'll still be able to identify that bird. For many of you, if you've just downloaded the app, this might say Get Photo ID. It's sort of a different package that you download, so it's an optional download, again, totally free. But so if I select that and I select Choose Photo, it's going to bring up the photos that are on my iPad. And I'm going to go ahead and select this picture that's a little bit dark. It's hard to see the colors. And it's going to ask me to zoom in until my bird fills the box. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'll select Next. It's going to ask me to confirm the date and location. And again, this was outside my house. So I'll select Identify. And even though it was really hard to see the colors on that photo and the bird wasn't beautifully accentuated, it was able to identify my bird as a chipping sparrow, which I was out there and I heard it calling, and it is a chipping sparrow. So it's a pretty cool resource in terms of its ability to do photo identification. So that's your quick walkthrough of Merlin Bird ID. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my PowerPoint. And I had initially planned to have you all try this on your own, but from my initial poll, we only have about 4 people who've downloaded Merlin Bird ID. So I just want to note a couple of things before we move on, and if you have downloaded Merlin Bird ID, feel free to give this a shot. The one thing I want to mention is that I always have a really hard time with the colors of the birds. You know, sometimes the lighting is not optimal, where you see a bird or it flies off quickly, or even with this bird, I had a hard time when I was using Maryland Bird ID deciding whether I wanted to call the top of its head red or orange, because to me it's sort of somewhere in between. And the colors, so I find when I'm going through the app that the colors are where I get a hang up, and sometimes I don't see a bird that looks like what I saw. And so I'll go back through and edit the colors. And so the first time I tried to identify this bird, I chose orange, white, and brown, and I didn't get any bird that looked like my picture. So I went back and chose red, white, and brown, and that got me to chipping sparrow, which is the correct bird identification. So I would just say, definitely make sure that if you don't get to the bird, you can go back through and change your settings. And, you know, if you were unsure about something that you entered, go ahead and do that. And Chris, I'm excited to see that you successfully identified the bird as a chipping sparrow. So with that, we're gonna go ahead. And so now that you have an app that can help you to identify birds, we're gonna talk through eBird, which once you've identified the birds with eBird, I'll take you back to this slide to remind you, you can keep track of the birds that you're seeing by creating lists. And then with those lists, you can contribute to community science and conservation projects. So we're gonna return to my iPad screen. Let me just pull that back up. And so now I'm gonna open the eBird app. And if you have the eBird app, feel free to follow along, and if not, that's okay. And so eBird is gonna look a little bit different because it's really data collection oriented. So it's automatically telling me the date and time that I've opened the app. And then it's ready to record my track. So if I'm going out on a walk, eBird wants to be recording that track, because for scientists who are collecting data on birds, being able to know exactly how far you walked is really informative. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'm gonna go ahead and turn that off because I'm standing in my house. And so then I'm gonna go ahead and say start checklist. And so this is gonna look a little bit different than Maryland Bird ID. It's just gonna be this very simple list of birds. And again, this is all of the likely species that I might see in my location at this time of year. It does help us out a little bit that this dark red circle that you can see next to the bird name, the dark red means that it's a rare species in my area at that time of year, and the orange half-filled circle means it's uncommon at that time of year. So if we pretended that we were going on a walk and maybe I saw a mallard, there's a couple of ways that I can input data into eBird. I can click on the name, which will bring me to the observation details screen. And the first thing it wants to know is how many birds I observed that are mallards. So let's say I saw 2 mallards. I'm just gonna go ahead and enter that. But one of the neat things is that I could double check my identification by clicking on that button, and it's gonna automatically open Maryland Bird ID and take me to that species detail page so that I can confirm my identification. And then I will just have to navigate back to eBird. When you're on the observation details screen, it does ask you for a breeding code. That breeding code is something that if you're getting really advanced in your birding, it's a great thing to enter. It gives scientists a little bit more information, but it's not a critical piece of information. And for most of us who are sort of more casual birders, it's okay to leave it blank. So then I'm gonna go ahead and select done. And to just show you a few more things, if we go down to this green checkbox at the bottom, that is filtering the birds that I saw based on what I've selected and added. And if I were finished, I could go ahead and select review, and it would bring me to the last screen before I enter my information. So it gives me the date and time that I did it. It would ask me to choose a location. I'm not gonna submit this list, so I'm not gonna enter a location at this moment in time, because I just wanna cover one last thing, which is the observation type. And this is really critical when it comes to uploading information to eBird, because again, it helps people who are pulling this information for science. So it's asking what type of birding you were doing. So if you went on a walk and you traveled more than 30 meters, that would be traveling birding. If you were sitting outside on your porch and you were birding, that would be stationary. Or you could select incidental birding. And when I upload lists to eBird, mine are frequently incidental, where I was outside doing other things, but I happened to see some birds and I want to go ahead and upload them so I remember what I saw. And that's incidental birding. So birding was not the primary thing I was doing. And then it's going to ask me the number of observers. And it asks us this question of, is this a complete checklist? And when it's incidental birding, the answer is almost always no, because you were doing other things and it's unlikely that you identified all your birds. If you chose a different type, you would have the option to select yes or no to this question. And if I selected a location, this continue button would then say submit, and I would go ahead and submit that. In this case, I'm not going to submit my checklist again because it was an arbitrary, I made it up for the purposes of this presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my phone screen and go back to my presentation. And I just want to cover one last fun fact. So eBird.org is a great resource for bird anything. So this is an animation showing the abundance of golden crown kinglets across the time of the year. So you can see their migration north into Canada during the summer months and then them coming back south. And you can look up this information for any bird species. And so they have a lot of really great animations that I encourage you to check out. And with that, I'll take about 2 minutes right now for questions. If anyone has any questions for me, feel free to unmute yourself or post it in the chat box. And then we'll transition over to Brent after taking questions. All right, I am not seeing any questions or any hands raised.
Julia,
Yes.
if I could jump in while people are thinking of their questions.
Yeah.
Thank you for the demo of eBird. I just wanted to point out that eBird is also what the New York State Bird Atlas is using to collect information and add to this great community science project for the next 5 years to figure out what birds are in New York. So I'll pop a link to that in the chat box in case.
Thanks, Nicole. And Nicole, you and I had a, so someone just asked how you can identify birds by their bird song. And if I remember, you had an app you were using. I have not found an app that successfully identifies bird songs for me. So I do a lot of listening and then playing back songs. So Nicole, I don't know if the app you've been using, if it's worked.
I've used a few. Right now I have Song Sleuth, but I've sort of recently re-downloaded it. I've used it on a few trips before while birding. I'll type that one in the chat box too if people want it.
Thank you. And then I was also asked if we used gray instead of olive green, would the bird possibilities be similar? And I actually haven't tested that. If you want to go ahead and test that and see, I will also look and see, because I did fluctuate between whether the bird had a gray back or a green back. And that's one of those, if I had tried gray and hadn't seen a bird that was similar, I would have gone back and readjusted it. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to Brent. So Brent, you should now be the meeting host. If anyone comes up with any more bird questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring that while Brent talks.
Okay. Hi, guys. I'm going to get my presentation up and running here. Give me a second. Just want to make sure I got the right one. Yeah, we're good. So thanks for logging on, guys. Julia, that was amazing. I learned a lot. I haven't used many bird apps, and now I'm ready to go. So I'm going to talk to you, the rest of you guys, about Seek and iNaturalist. And these are two nature apps that I found immensely helpful and really amazing for learning about the biodiversity, plants, animals, and even mushrooms that I see around me. Before we get into the apps themselves, just a little bit of a background. as to how I got into these apps and got into citizen and community science. I was a high school educator for a long time in a K through 12 setting. And what was awesome about working in that environment was just seeing kids get so excited to explore and be outdoors. And just when they saw something new, whether it was a plant, an animal, a butterfly, a fish, or whatever, that just the smiles on their faces, the genuine sense of wonder about the natural world. A lot of these pictures you're seeing here were actually citizen or community science projects that I was a part of with kids, whether it was tracking monarch migrations across North America and helping to weigh in and provide data to scientists. We did a lot of eel counts in the Hudson River, tracked invasive shrimp in the Hudson too. And so what I really like about community-based science is that not only is it fun to explore and learn, but you're also able, as a citizen or a community member, to basically contribute towards a larger scientific project. And so some of these apps that we're going to be talking about today, I'll show you how to actually contribute and learn and become like excited about exploring nature and getting outdoors again, just like you were a kid again. As to how that translates into adult life, a lot of those questions that I used to ask my students about the who, what, when, where, why, how, I've often thought in my current role, how do we get adults as excited as you were when you were a kid, just exploring out, catching frogs or whatever? And I really think that citizen and community science can be the answer to that. In my current role as I'm the citizen science coordinator for invasive, particularly focused on invasive species with the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference. I help to coordinate the invasive strike force, which basically I work with and train volunteers of all ages, kids all the way up through, retired gardeners that are just looking for a project and just really want to give back and explore. We look at and track invasive species distributions in the lower Hudson Valley, and we use both Seek and iNaturalist, or these two apps, as learning tools to help. And this is just a picture of some of the interns I had working with me this summer using some of the apps to help explore invasive species. And really, I found huge user satisfaction from all ages, all kinds of backgrounds, even if you're a technophobe. Seek and iNaturalist are amazing tools for helping to learn what's around you. And I guarantee that if you give it a shot, you will love it, and like your knowledge of what's around you will skyrocket. Just to introduce these two, Seek is an app that was created by iNaturalist. So Seek is sort of like a sister app with iNaturalist. And what iNaturalist is, just think about it as a large online photo database, and it's a community. So imagine like you have all of these nature pictures that people have taken over the years, and it's stored in iNaturalist. And what is amazing about Seek is that it uses live image recognition software. So all you need to do is literally hold up your phone, point it at whatever plant or bug or like mushroom that you want to learn about, and in real time, almost like a live barcode scanner, it'll pop up on your phone exactly what you're looking at in real time. It's really amazing. As to why to use it, I think Julia covered this a lot. I also am a science eco nerd and love field guides, but oftentimes you don't have a field guide with you, or the picture that's in the field guide happened to be something from the fall, but you're out in the spring. I mean, we all know that flowers and plants, they look very different depending on the season, right? So the beauty of using an app like Seek that gives you immediate feedback is that it can help supplement field guides. It's a huge time saver. It really satisfies curiosity and can quickly build your knowledge of local biodiversity around you. And honestly, as a former teacher and a nature enthusiast, I think the main reason is that it's fun and you get to learn and explore and figure out like what's been living like literally in your backyard, but you had no clue before, you didn't know how to ask it. So I just going to stop this share and I'm going to show you a little tutorial, and I'll stop it at certain positions so that you can kind of follow along and see how it works. So we'll start with Seek by iNaturalist first. This is its main website where you can also find tutorials. So I'm going to put this in screen mode here. You might have to move like the boxes where you see our faces in order to see certain parts of the screen, but we'll let this play and hopefully you guys can hear it. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear noise coming out. So here's a guy that's going for a hike. He's going for a walk. And all he's doing right now, I don't know if you can see in your screen, but if you want to look over on this part of the screen, he's pointing his phone at this flower over here. And what he's seeing on this phone is that a couple of different boxes here. First, this green box, that one's important. That kind of tells you the general classification of what it is that you're seeing. So this is a class of species, and it's saying that it's dicots. And for anyone who's knows plants, that's a super broad category. So if you're getting this as an ID recognition, it means that you got to slightly change the angle of your phone or keep playing around with it till you get a species ID. So let's see what happens here. So you see how in a second, he just slightly changed the angle of his phone, and now it's saying that what his phone is literally pointed at in real time is a blue blossom. And it doesn't require taking a photo. It gives you real feedback, so you can actually change the angles and stuff on your phone till it pops up with a species ID, which is really awesome. You don't have to worry about taking pictures or whether you got the right angle or you're zoomed in or out. So now he's going to look at another one and figures out what this pink flower is over here in real time, which I've never heard of. It's a dwarf checker mallow. It's a great way to learn. Now, as I said before, with Seek, you don't have to take a picture. It gives you real feedback in real time, so you don't have to take a picture. But the beauty of taking a picture of what you're looking at is then you can actually learn more about what it is that you're seeing. So like for me, I have no idea what a dwarf checker mallow is. So I could take a picture of it, and it'll take me to a page where I can click this and learn about the species. And I know it was on there for like a split second. Let's see if we can go back. One more. Okay, I'm gonna pause it in a second here. You see up here how it says that that species is native? And Julia talked about that before. That means that it's a flower that has evolved in that ecosystem and is not non-native or introduced species or an invasive species. So we know that it's a native plant to that area. We can also learn about it. It actually will link you to a Wikipedia page if you want. It'll show you that this happens to be taken in San Francisco. It shows you where all the dwarf checker mallows are and how many people have posted in that region. It'll tell you about what the plant is related to. Is it it's in the mallow family? You know, is it checker bloom? Is the genus? And that actually went by pretty quickly there, but it will also tell you about how many observations were posted of that nearby, how many posted were worldwide. And you guys see down here how it has the seasonality to it. So what's really nice about that aspect of it is it usually tells you something about when the flower is blooming or when the plant is blooming or something that would make people want to take a picture of it. So you can see like during this time, you know, there's a lot of pictures being taken of this plant and probably that is blooming at that time. So we can track biological changes through that or something called phenology or the timing of biological events. Okay, so I have a couple of kids at home, myself, young ones, who are doing a lot of home learning right now. We're inventing projects for them and trying to get them outdoors and exploring. And what's great about Seek is that it does have a couple of different features. If you've got grandkids or kids at home and you want them to go out exploring and learning about what's in your yard, you can use Seek, and they have fun ways so you can earn badges. You can enter into challenges to find different species, and you can get into like different levels in gameplay. You don't have to use it for this, but I just wanted to point out that it is an aspect of what you can do. So, I mean, that's the basics of how to use it. And honestly, like if you are not even technologically inclined, you have to ask yourself, can I take a picture with my camera? And if the answer to that question is yes, then you should be able to use these apps. It literally, you open it up, you point your phone at something, and it'll tell you in real time what it is that you're looking at. So a lot of people are, you know, reluctant to use new technology and apps, saying I'm not good at it, or I'm not technologically sound. But I promise you that it is awesome and pretty easy to use as long as you can take a picture with your phone. So just a few other things that I wanted to point out. So first of all, if you're not getting that ID you want, say you're getting that annoying like class dicots and you're not really getting into the level of species that you want, there's a couple of different tricks. You could do like just zoom your phone out a little bit more, just literally like move your phone back away from what you're looking at, maybe get a little bit closer to what you're looking at. I often find that what is called like the leaf shot is good. So say like I got a feature that I want to cue in on, which is like either the leaf shape or usually the fruit or flower is what the Seek app is really good at identifying. So you may even like hold your hand up to it because it gives the app a sense of scale. And certainly like, you know, it's still a little early in the season for Seek to know like almost everything it's looking at. But if you wait till true leaf out and you're starting to see things blooming, it's phenomenal at identifying what it is in your backyard. So, or on your hikes or in your park. So it's an amazing app and a great thing to have in your back pocket. So just to summarize, Seek's an awesome tool for learning about the living world around us. You can really get caught up to speed very quickly in a short amount of time as to what plants and animals, and I use it for bugs a lot. Basically anything that doesn't move super fast that you can hold your phone up to and won't run away. It does a great job with IDing, and it gets you excited to be outdoors and explore. If you do have the app on your phone, I want you to try to ID. So if you open up your Seek app, and it should be a little leaf symbol, and you hold it up to what you're seeing on the screen, I'm hopeful that you're going to get that green species on it and also tell you what it is that you're looking at. And if you do want to go the extra step and take a picture of it to learn about it, you will find out that this is the spotted lanternfly, which is a non-native invasive species that's causing all sorts of havoc in Pennsylvania right now. It secretes like a honeydew substance, and they're like plague proportions in Pennsylvania right now. And they are a agricultural pest. And honestly, if you're like in a park or trying to go for a hike, it just rains down sticky stuff in the trees that they're in and makes the hiking experience really unenjoyable. So we're trying to keep these out of New York State, and just wanted to point this out as something that, you know, if you're out and you're Seek and you think you might see this in your backyard, you should use the app to help figure out what it is. So that's the spotted lanternfly. Hopefully that worked for you guys. If you do have the app, you should try it and check it out. The next thing that I wanted to point out is how, like, so Seek is really great, but remember that I told you that it also works with here. I got to move my screen out of the way here. There we go. I can't see my own screen. There we go. You can also use iNaturalist. So iNaturalist works together with Seek so you can actually post the photos or the IDs that you're getting with Seek to an iNaturalist database. And Julia did a really nice job of explaining this before, but basically what iNaturalist is it's an online social network of people that help each other learn about what they're seeing. Like, for example, Seek is awesome with ID. It gives you real feedback in real time, but remember, it's limited because it's scanning the iNaturalist database. So it doesn't really allow you to contribute data to anything. So if you see something and you wanted to post it and tell others about it, or for scientists to actually use that observation for some purpose, Seek can't do that by itself. It really needs iNaturalist to do that. And I do want to point that out, especially as a citizen science coordinator, is that, you know, iNaturalist is an amazing community, and it gives a data component to your exploration. So right now, iNaturalist is close to 1 million scientists and novice naturalists like us who can help you learn more about nature. And so what it adds is, like, if you have a picture of something, you can contribute that picture to the iNaturalist database. Scientists like it found in our organization or research institutions can then look at that picture that you posted, confirm what it is that you saw, and then use that data about where the species is in our region to make management decisions. And I'm sure Hudson Highlands Land Trust also uses data like this that citizen scientists contribute to make a lot of decisions on how to manage your lands. So as a trail conference, certainly, and as someone who is in invasive species management, I use posts from community members all the time to drive a lot of the decisions as to where we're going to do, say, our invasive species removal projects, or make decisions as to how this invasive is moving across the landscape. So if and when you do log on to Seek, you can also sign up for iNaturalist at the same time. So you'll get this screen when you go to Seek to sign up for iNaturalist or log in with iNaturalist. And what that provides is basically the opportunity. So you get your ID with Seek, and then you can post to iNaturalist. So then it can be used by scientists and other community members to see where it is and what it is that you saw. The other option for you, and I know many people just forego Seek altogether, is to use the iNaturalist app to post your data directly. It's a very similar procedure to what I just taught you, but I'm going to show you iNaturalist tutorial on that as to how that app works and how it's, slightly different. Give me a second here. And how it's slightly different. Okay, here we go. Just give me a second. All right, so I'm going to play another tutorial for you. This is the iNaturalist tutorial.
Okay, so you've installed the iNaturalist app and created an account. Time to get outside and record your first observation. Here's how to do it. Any living thing, like a plant, animal, or fungus, can be an observation on iNaturalist. Once you find something you'd like to record, just tap Observe and take a photo.
Okay, so basically, Seek tells you in real time. With iNaturalist, you actually have to take a photo of what it is that you're looking at. So say you wanted to figure out what was growing on this tree. You hold up your phone just like it is a camera, just like you're using your camera, and you literally take a picture of it. That's the first step. You just simply hit this green button like you're taking a photo of your kids or grandkids, and then you take a photo of what it is that you want to ID.
You can review your picture, then hit Next if it looks good. To identify it, hit What did you see?
Okay, so that is one of the main differences with Seek. After you take that picture and you hit Next, you got to hit this, what is called a What Did You See button to get to that next screen. And it's going to give you a list of suggestions as to what the app believes that it is that you're looking at.
If you have an internet connection, iNaturalist will suggest 10 visually similar species and often a common answer.
Okay, so in this example here, the app is pretty sure that what you are looking at is in the genus of green shields. And then it'll list 10 species suggestions that are even more specific than just like, oh, those are green shields there. So you can click on the information parts to learn a little bit about it. And it does list the suggestions in order of what it thinks that it is. So typically it's the first suggestion, but not always. But if you're not sure, what I say to a lot of beginners, if you're not absolutely certain, you can just go to the genus part and just identify it down to genus. And the beauty of using iNaturalist is when you post something, you'll actually have experts helping out and weighing in on what it is that you're seeing, so you don't get a false ID.
On this observation detail screen, you can add more photos of the same organism or write a note. The date, time, and location have been automatically added. You can also change the geoprivacy of the observation. Mark whether it's captive or cultive.
This part is actually critical because the thing about Seek and why it's really good with kids too is that it automatically preserves your privacy. But if you do want to post your observations and make it available to scientists and other community members, you can turn your privacy to open, which then allows to pinpoint exactly what you saw at that location, which is good because then it can be used in more larger scientific projects. And if you do happen to use this out in your backyard, just make sure that you note that it's captive or cultivated, so that we know it's not like a wild version of whatever plant that you have, like in your garden.
Or add it to a project. Once you're finished, just hit share. Your observation will be uploaded for everyone to see and identify. That's it. Keep on exploring and sharing.
So the good part is that, you know, you've got a couple of different options, you know, for which apps that you want to use and what you're comfortable with. But the bottom line is that, you know, you can use both Seek and iNaturalist. They work together. iNaturalist just adds that citizen science or that community data component to it. And there's a couple of other benefits that I'll talk about in a second. As to one of the main benefits, honestly, is that you're contributing valuable data. It's an important time to become a biodiversity citizen scientist. And by having community members like you guys actually recording and reporting what it is that you're seeing, it helps us managers make decisions about what areas to preserve and where to put our resources and effort. And really, any good citizen science project really involves a back and forth and a dialogue between the community member and whoever it is, the scientist or researcher or whoever it is on the other end. And we are faced in a time where we're getting critical losses in biodiversity worldwide. I mean, we've seen since 1970 a 60% decline in vertebrates. The freshwater populations in particular have been really hit hard. And worldwide, yeah, habitat degradation and exploitation are big driving factors. But here in the US, the largest threat to biodiversity and our native plants is our invasive species here in the US. This is a major, major issue. So by having community members get out and actually like take pictures of the native plants and also the invasives that we're finding in our habitats, we're able to make better, more informed management decisions from there. The other benefit of using iNaturalist is that you can receive expert help right away. And I give an example of a snake that I found in my backyard. I've got kids that are running around the backyard. I've got a dog in my backyard. It was blending into the ground. I was freaked out. So I used iNaturalist, took a picture, and literally within 24 hours, I got 2 other experts saw my picture that I posted and confirmed that it was an eastern milk snake. So the beauty of using iNaturalist is even if you're not sure, I literally just posted, it's a snake that's in my backyard. I was able to get feedback from experts instantaneously. That's the advantage of iNaturalist. Seek can't do that for you. It just helps with the IDs. But now that you can post directly from Seek to iNaturalist, and the 2 are working in concert with one another. But it was awesome. I learned that it was a milk snake and that it was really not much to fear for my dogs and kids' safety. I also learned about the top identifiers of the milk snake. If I had a question that I wanted to ask these guys, I was able to like get in touch with them. These are all the experts that weighed in on eastern milk snakes in history through iNaturalist. So I had like a great gateway to get in touch with these guys if I wanted to. It's an awesome way of connecting. And honestly, when I post something that I don't know and want feedback on, virtually almost every time I'll get feedback within a maximum of like a week or so. Usually I get feedback within a couple of days of like an observation that I wanted to know more about. So in sum, you know, joining iNaturalist takes your seeking to the next level. In other words, it not just tells you about the ID itself and what it is that you're seeing in real time, but it allows you to share those observations with a larger network. It helps inform management decisions and allows for a deeper connection to and dialogue with other naturalists so that experts can weigh in and you become more of a like part of the conversation about what's going on. So these are all like great advantages to what's happening. And it also helps us to track our biodiversity and what we're trying to protect in our parks and forests and places that we love visiting. And I put up on the previous slide that Netflix has a great series called Our Planet that tracks a lot of the issues going on with global biodiversity. And actually Seek and iNaturalist was born out of that effort and towards like trying to get community members to post and learn about the plants and animals that are around us and how to preserve them. So this is just another example. If you wanted to practice, I don't know how much time we have here, but if you did have iNaturalist on your phone, this is an invasive species that maybe some of you are familiar with in your own backyard. You could use iNaturalist to help you identify it so you know, yeah, maybe I should remove this invasive shrub that I'm seeing on my property and plant this good opportunity to plant a native plant instead. So if you do open up iNaturalist and you do get a chance to try and take a picture, I say go for it. I'll give you guys a few minutes to do that. And just remember to hit the "What did you see" button. And it will probably give you the genus, which is a barberry, and its top suggestion is the dreaded Japanese barberry, which is taking over a lot of our forest understory and killing a lot of the native plants and outcompeting them in a lot of our forest habitats. So I just give this as an example of something else that you can use in another tool in your toolbox to use. If you did want to engage in some of these citizen science programs, we put out like a monthly scavenger hunt style challenge every month, where typically it's like we pick a species that is blooming in that particular month and has good obvious features and key ID features, whether its fruits are coming out or it's flowering or something. And then we ask our volunteers to go out and take photographs through Seek and iNaturalist and post them. It's really easy and fun. You can do it on your own time, no strings attached. So we also have more formal scientific surveyor options. So if you are a plants nerd or a gardener and you want to give back and help us survey for invasive species in our regions and local parks, you're able to. You can earn community service hours and master gardener service hours. So I have my email address up there, invasives at NYNJTC.org if you wanted to get involved. But at the very minimum, like Seek and iNaturalist are so fun, really easy to use. It's literally just pointing your camera at whatever you want, and you'll learn so much about what's in your backyard and in the parks that we love to enjoy. Just learning about nature. So as to why to be a naturalist, because honestly, asking questions and exploring is fun. So, and it's also really critical to protecting the environments and places that we love. So with that, I think we have a couple minutes before 2, and I know that Julia and I will stay on. If you guys have questions, I saw that the chat box has been blinking, so I can take a look at that and certainly take questions that you guys have.
Thanks, Brent, for a great presentation. You got a question about the Netflix show that you mentioned, what it was.
Yeah, let me go back and look at it. I got to make sure I got the right. Yeah, I mean, it was, Seek was actually born out of that series. It was called, I think it's called Our Planet. And I've seen a couple of the episodes. Well, I must say that I'm really biased because I'm a huge, let's see, can I share my screen again? Let's see if I can get that up again. Can you guys see the screen? Yeah, you can see the screen now, right? Yeah, it's called Our Planet, and it's on Netflix. And I'm like, I am a big nature nerd, and I love David Attenborough. I don't know if you guys know who that is, but he's the voice of all the BBC nature wildlife shows, and he does a phenomenal job of narration. Yeah, and it just goes through different ecosystems and habitats globally. And it just looks at some of the plight of some of the species that are on the brink and what we can do about it. And it's, there are definitely, messages and hopeful messages in there, and certainly participating in a citizen science project is one way that we can give back and do something and give back to help us track where a lot of the native species we are trying to protect are, and how invasive species are kind of creeping into the habitats, and what we can do about it before they become problems and start disrupting function. Let's see. Any other questions? I see feedback on incorporating the apps into science classes. Definitely. But all of these apps would be phenomenal for the classroom.
And Mark, I typed in 2 links for HHLT's website. We have guides for iNaturalist and Seek, and the Seek one is especially designed for kids that you would be more than welcome to use with your classes. And anyone else who wants resources on that, definitely go to our website, hhlt.org/iNaturalist. We'll get you guides for both of those. And then I also have 2 videos that I've created as part of our Nature Time series. which is hhlt.org/nature-time, if you want to remember how to use these at a later date.
I'll just also point out, if you go out, if you're just like ready and raring to go, like, and you want to use these apps, if you wait literally like 2 or 3 weeks when things start blooming and leafing out, they will work much, much better. So don't give up. Don't be frustrated at first. Just wait a little bit. And because they work the best, obviously, with the key features. So if the leaves aren't fully formed yet, you know, it may not be able to ID it as well. But the beauty is, the more that you actually post onto iNaturalist of what you're seeing, the better the Seek app will get, right? Because the more pictures you post with the right ID, you're actually contributing to making the app better and better and better. So it's only going to get better over time.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Feel free to stick around if you have more questions. Brent and I both put our emails throughout our presentations. Feel free to contact us if you have questions.
Chris also made a good point, just to be mindful of, you know, when we are, it's often, you can get carried away with these apps and wanting to learn everything, but just avoid, you know, you know, sensitive areas that could disturb other vegetation and wildlife. He makes a good point there to, you know, just be smart about it and stay to defined tracks. And certainly, you know, during this time of social distancing, like, now's the time to figure out everything that's growing in your yard.
Learn about your gardens.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
We're fine to say, if you guys have questions, verbal questions that you want to put in the chat box, we're at a low enough number now where you can just ask if you got them.
Feel free to unmute yourselves.
Thank you both.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming.
Really super presentation. We loved it.
Good.
So I'm actually not Mark, but I'm the science teacher. I don't know why. I think it's because Zoom is registered under his name. I'm not really.
Yeah.
I'm Heather. Sorry.
Hello.
So my question, I know you said that iNaturalist has, I definitely like the community link. My concern is the students' privacy. And I know you said something about changing the settings on there. Can you explain that?
No, I'm going to change the password.
Yeah, sure. Basically, yeah, when you get, it's hard to show. Do you have the app on your phone? Probably not, right?
I do, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, when you take a picture and then you go to like, what do you see?
Mm-hmm.
There will be a part in there where it says geo privacy, and you just need to change that to private.
Oh, okay.
Or there's a, Julia, do you remember, it's called like?
Obscure. You can obscure your location. So when you obscure your location, it randomizes the location within like a 12 by 12 square mile block. Okay. So that way you still get location data, but not, you know, like your backyard.
I might just put it on my school iPads, and then I don't have to worry about their data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do know. I was supposed to be running a bio blitz this summer that involved like a whole bunch of kids and community members, and we were trying to figure out all these questions out that you're asking about now. And so what was my and when I'm doing the reading about that, they were encouraging most like younger kids or beginners to start with Seek,
right?
Because of that issue, and also just so that they're not posting. They're not like pressured to post like a million photos of the same thing, which, you know, so it's a good like first initial introduction into ID apps. Probably want to use Seek first.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, if you don't display if you mark your location as private with iNaturalist, the data is less useful to community science projects, and the database because they don't know the location. So,
Right.
you know, we can't then pull that and say, you know, I pull information for Granite Mountain Preserve that we own, and if it's private, obviously I don't know if it was posted there. So it's another thing to consider on that front. But definitely feel free to use my guides if that would help your kids at all. I don't remember, let's see. I made a Seek guide that includes like vocabulary words and key concepts like taxonomy and, you know, genus and species and that sort of thing. Sort of gearing it
you
towards
cover in
teachers.
7th grade science.
So.
Oh, you know, another thing I wanted to point out, as Julia had mentioned in hers, you can do the same thing with Seek and iNaturalist. Like if you have a photo on your phone and that you took like a long time ago and you're just like, what the heck is this thing? I never got an answer to it. You can actually, you have the same, there's like on the left-hand side, it's like camera function. And then on the right, it's like photo. And if you click that, you can just upload it and it will tell you what it is. Like a picture you might've taken like years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do that all the time. I've been cleaning out my photos while, you know, I'm at home all the time. And so I'm like, oh, what is this weird plant I saw? Cool.
All right.
Well, if we have no other questions, I think maybe we can go ahead and end the meeting, Brent.
Okay,
I
sounds
think
good.
you're
Thank
still
you so
host.
much.
Yeah.